Hello. Yes. Hello.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello. Mic test. Mic test. Hello. Hello.
Batihan niyo ko. Mic test.
Oo.
Tara. Hello, mic test. Kay Sir Bernie.
Hello? Pero tira ko lang. Kaon.
Hello.
Hello, Mike. Hello.
Hello. Mic test.
Ay, kasapot sa participants.
Batian ko ka mo.
Nabatian na kami.
Okay na ako ninyo.
Mic test. Mic. Tara.
Hello. Mic test.
Okay yung
Oh,
audio.
ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Audio, okay na.
Hello po. Pag-mute na po ng audio niyo. Because yung questions niyo po is kukunin na namin through chat. So no need po for your audio. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Hello.
Hello, ma'am. Ay, uy, hindi pa gamit. Kinanglan ko na may ara ko nga wipin.
Yung Henry nagapumahaw.
Mic check. Tara kay Sir.
Ah,
Ay, oh.
yahay akong gamit.
Sound check.
Okay. Batihan niyo si Sir. Wala na kayo. Ay, mag-echo isa. Naka-off si Sir. Echo si Sir ninyo.
Ay, nang tunet. Ang tunet, hello.
Mic check. Mag-echo. Mag-echo na. Tapos pa. Mic check.
Para sila tanan siyo. Para si tunet to.
Hi, Tonet!
Hello, Miss D.
Hello!
Hello, Alan.
Ah.
Ako nang upod na iba.
When the webinar starts and audio feedbacks and also today wala po tayong feedback sa the presence of Dr. Annabelle Briones. Partner of
Check, check.
Hello.
Ito.
Sound check. Okay na ba? Marinig lang.
Mic check. Mic check. Nag-feedback ka? Okay na, sir. Okay,
Hello. Sound check. Ano malaman yan?
Ako na ano.
Good morning. May we request anyone to switch off your microphone or switch your phone to listen mode. Thank you. Good morning. May I request everyone to switch off your microphone. Thank you. Good morning. Maayong aga sa inyo. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all to Expert Online or Expert O webinar entitled Basic Concepts and Innovations in Food Packaging by Central Philippine University and UST Industrial Technology Development Institute. This is Joanna Valences, technical staff of the Science and Technology Services of the DOST Regional Office 6, and I will be your host and moderator for this session. This is the third episode of this for the series on business opportunities for food innovation, because we at UST believes that one way to move forward from the COVID-19 pandemic is by coming up with innovative food products. First of all, we would like to start today's activity with a prayer to be led by Ms. Kay Cristel S. Cainglet, Science Research Analyst of UST6, and to be followed by the singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
Hello. Let's pray. Loving Heavenly Father, thank you for all the blessings you have bestowed upon us. We are truly grateful for them. We come to you at this hour asking for your blessing and help as we gathered together and you allowed us to meet and share our knowledge and time with one another in this webinar. May you extend your divine wisdom to all our speakers so that they would be able to impart effectively their God-given knowledge to all of us. Bless the participants as well so that they would be able to glean the vital information from this activity. May we realize that this activity should glorify your name. We ask this in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, before we begin, we just have a few reminders. Everyone is in listen mode except for the speaker and the moderator. Please switch off your microphone when the webinar starts to prevent audio feedback. After the presentation, we will accommodate questions during the open forum session. All participants may send in their questions through the chat window. Just type in the name of your institution, your questions, and to whom you address it. Please take time to answer the evaluation form after the webinar in order to get a certificate. The link for this will be announced later on. We remind all Google Meet participants who have not yet registered, please register on the link flashed on the screen for attendance purposes. At this point, let us have the DOST ITDI Director, Dr. Annabel B. Briones, for the opening message.
Hello to the viewers and participants of this webinar, to our speakers and the organizers. A pleasant day to everyone. Let me thank Director Rowan Gilonga of DOST6 for inviting me to this webinar to give a short welcome. So, I would like to welcome everyone to this webinar on the basic concepts and innovations in food packaging. We have esteemed experts from the Central Philippine University, Mr. Ron Adrian A. Ginaldo and Engineer Bernie C. Cangrejo. They will talk on the fundamentals of packaging and the basics of transport packaging. And we have our very own ITDI expert, Engineer Angel T. Basbasan Jr. from the Packaging Technology Division of ITDI, who will discuss the introduction to smart packaging technology. Food packaging plays such an important role in the preservation and marketability of a product. So the packaging is an essential medium for preserving food quality, minimizing food wastage, and reducing preservatives used in food. Through this webinar, we will be able to learn what is packaging all about, its importance, and the latest trends in packaging. Amidst this COVID-19 pandemic, we at the UST will make sure that we can bring science to the people. Just for the information of everyone, the Packaging Technology Division of ITDI provides the following services. So we have our packaging assistance to the SMEs systemically and comprehensively through world-class innovative and sustainable packaging technology towards global competitiveness. We also promote national branding through packaging to enhance the competitive position of Philippine products for the export market. Aside from that, we develop packaging for ethnic foods, enhance regional packaging capability, and create livelihood via community-based packaging projects to support regional and countryside development. And we also develop ready-to-eat foods in appropriate packaging as disaster or survival foods. And soon to be operational in the first quarter of 2021, I look forward to that, is the Simulation Packaging Testing Laboratory and the Green Packaging Laboratory. So please visit the website of DOST ITDI for more details of the services of the packaging technology division. Let me introduce the organizers of this webinar to Director Bilonga and his staff for this successful event. Again, welcome all to this event, and always remember that food is indispensable in life. Therefore, we make it good and package it well to last. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you, Dr. Briones. At this time, we would like to acknowledge our Google Meet participants as well as our viewers through the One Expert portal. It is a pleasure that that our regional directors from other regions are joining us today. We would like to especially acknowledge our participating MSMEs, DOST personnel, our colleagues from the Department of Agriculture and their beneficiaries, and interested stakeholders both from the private and public sectors. Madam Mugig na salamat. Food packaging is very important, especially to our MSMEs in the food manufacturing sector, not just to contain and store food, but also to preserve its quality and safety. Nowadays, people are getting more conscious of the food products sold in the market. Due to pandemic, more than ever, MSMEs must give emphasis on the importance of food packaging and innovation for safety, movement of products, and the anticipated demand for longer product shelf life. I think we are all set. I hope everyone is ready in their seats because at this point, we will meet our first expert speaker for today, who will orient us about fundamentals of food packaging. Let us welcome Mr. Juan Adrian A. Ginaldo from Packaging Engineering Department, College of Engineering, Central Philippine University.
Fundamentals of Packaging, organized by the DOST, and we have here from CPU Packaging Engineering Department. So to give you a brief overview of our topic, it will be divided into two parts. First, we will have some basic packaging awareness, and then since we're in the COVID pandemic, we will relate packaging and COVID. So we will see the interaction between packaging and COVID. So to start with the basic concepts in packaging, this is our outline. We'll first describe what is packaging, what are the levels of packaging, what are the different types of packaging, what are the packaging materials, and packaging applications. Well, let's start. When we talk about packaging, the first thing that comes into the minds of consumers are usually the actual product, yung concrete na product talaga. So it's the thing that you see in your supermarket. So technically, it could be defined as the enclosure of products, items, or packages. So there on your screen, there are the different formats of packaging like bag, pouch, bottle, carton, sachet, and you are all familiar with that. However, all of these packaging are there to perform 4 major functions. So we will talk about these 4 major functions in a short while. I will show you pictures of different types of packaging. But before I continue, let me just, we'll be using pictures from Google, and some of them have brands on them. So we're not endorsing any of these brands, but they will just be used as visual aids to support ang topic natin ngayon. So this would be pictures of packaging. You're familiar with them. So these are bottles. We have here more pictures. On the bottom, you could see we have cases and cartons or transport packaging. And even these types of packaging are also called or under the definition of packaging, transport packaging. So warehousing, logistics, distribution, they're all part of packaging. So previously, we've discussed that packaging performs 4 major functions. So ano ba yung 4 na functions na yon? So here are the 4 major functions of packaging: containment, protection, communication, and utility. And we have another consideration. No? It could be possible that your packaging is very, very good. Good yung quality niya, very protective siya, and maganda yung graphics, pero sobrang mahal naman. So we have to consider always that our packaging should be cost-effective. So let's go through each of these 4 major functions. Let's start with containment. Containment means to contain and carry. So yung role talaga ng packaging is to make sure that the product does not become part of the environment. So in the pictures, we have their different products, and these are actually non-standard products like rice and grains, gases, and liquids. If your product is, for example, discrete or countable, usually there's no problem with containment. But for more irregularly shaped products and semi-solids and fluids, medyo mas mahirap siyang i-contain. So here it says that many products must be contained in order to be handled, and you should consider the nature of the product to determine its containment needs. So as mentioned, yung mga liquids, for example, they must always be contained to be handled. So medyo mahirap i-contain yung liquid kapag wala siyang packaging. It will spill. The same also goes with our free-flowing solids like powders and granules and grains. So most of our SMEs, they have powdered products like turmeric powder or yung salabat, and they should be contained properly. Also, some SMEs have furniture products, and large items have also containment issues. So they're larger, they take up more space, and there is strapping and restraining devices to be considered. So here in the picture, we have we're using pallets or wooden crates. So again, that's one of the first major function of packaging, is to contain and carry the product. The second function, which although they are all equal, I think protection is also one of the most useful and most important na function of packaging. So as you can see in our pictures there, the first picture on your left is an appliance. Maybe it's a monitor, and it's being protected with cushioning to prevent breakage. The one on the middle is a canned good. So we can products so that they will have a longer shelf life. So it's preserving the shelf life of the product. And sometimes we don't just protect the product itself, but we protect the consumer from the product. And packaging can do that, as evidenced in our third picture, which is a radioactive material. So it protects the consumer from the product itself. So products are exposed to different hazards during packaging, during storage, and transport. And these hazards can be categorized as physical, chemical, climatic. Climatic means yung moisture, oxygen, yung air. We have biological, and even man-made. So here is a list of the different hazards that our packaging might encounter. So yung compression, shock, vibration, breakage, mga physical na hazards yun. We have moisture, oxygen, and the other gases. They're more on the climate. So climatic sila, including temperature. Spoilage, contamination is biological. It could be micro or it could be macrobiological. We have light, also climatic. We have, I think this is a new term for some of you, ESD, or electrostatic discharge. This is a hazard which is related to our electronic devices. And finally, we have to protect the packaging from tampering and pilferage, which are man-made naman na mga hazards. So let's have an example for moisture, which is a common hazard. So let's say you're an SME and you have product which is chips. And then there's another MSME with a product which is bread. So both chips and breads are sensitive to moisture, but they react differently. For example, yung chips, they must not gain moisture. So you have to protect yung potato chips, for example, or kamote chips or banana chips from undesirable gain of moisture. So if you notice, if you buy snack foods or junk foods and then you open it and then you left it in the air, it will start to lose its crispness. So in our local term, we call that nahumoy siya. Okay? So it loses its crispness and it doesn't taste really good because it has absorbed moisture. However, the same is also true for our breads and cakes. So if you left it in the air, instead of absorbing moisture, it will evaporate its moisture. And when you taste that bread, it will taste stale or dry. So both of them, however, needs protection from moisture. So how could you protect your product from moisture? We have here, first, the packaging must be constructed of a material that has high resistance to the moisture passage. So plastics usually can do the job well. If your product is only wrapped in paper, then there is a little barrier against moisture. Another thing, make sure you must have tight seals. So the sealing of your packaging is important. So most SMEs seal their packaging. I think I've seen some of them use candle wax to seal their packaging. That's okay, but if you want added protection for moisture, it will be a good plan to invest in a sealer. So we have impulse sealer and band sealers. So moisture would be one hazard. Another is breakage. So you delivered your goods, but when it reached the customer, the goods are broken. So what can we do to stop breakage? First, put cushioning. So in the local term or in the layman's term, mga styrofoam. Okay. Here we use the technical term cushioning for that. You can also use restraints, mga strapping, to prevent the movement of our products. You could also, number 3, unitize our loads. For example, you have 100 pieces or 100 cartons of a small, say soap, for example. You're into the cosmetics industry. And then when somebody bumped the table, all 100 pieces of soap will just fall over. So unitizing loads means you wrap that 100 pieces into one item. So you put a shrink wrap or a stretch around them so that when it's bumped, for example, it will not fall over. That's called unitizing the load. And if you can, you could redesign the product. So for example, if your furniture is always broken, you might choose to redesign the material used for that furniture. Of course, some products cannot be redesigned, but as much as possible, we could try to redesign the product to prevent breakage. So the other hazards, I'll just show them very quickly. So temperature, we have that, and in the picture we have human organ, which I will discuss later on when it comes to the COVID and pandemic issues now. We have light. Some products may degrade, fade, or change in the presence of light. So that's why in the picture we have colored or pigmented bottles. Compression or crushing is also a hazard, especially during stacking in the warehouse or even during transportation. And we have dirt and infestation. So these are macrobiological creatures. We have flies, cockroaches, beetles. Of course, with the current conditions in the pandemic, we're also now concerned with the microbiological contamination of our packaging and products. We have tampering. This is a human or a man-made hazard. It's when somebody just opened a packaging or a product, then they change something inside and then they put it back on the shelf. So they could put poison there or they could change the product and you'd never know. But packaging can provide you a means of knowing that. Similar with our water bottles, the neck band with our water bottles, if it's kapag it's separated from its cap, then you could see that somebody has opened it previously. So we call that tamper-evident packaging. So that's it. Protection is the second function of packaging. Third, communication. So from containment and protection, those are, we can say they are technical aspects of packaging. Now the communication and the utility are more on the people aspect, on the marketing and the aesthetics of our packaging. And the communication is obviously to inform and sell. Let's have this for example. Imagine there's a mother walking in the grocery store and she has a child with him, toddler, in fact, bata pa yung child. Then nakita nung child yung packaging na ito. Yung first thing na makikita ng child is yung Batman na free luncher, yun yung una yung makikita. And then he will tell his mother to buy that packaging. Yung mother kasi medyo price sensitive, ayaw sanang bilhin yung product, but then she saw the labels on the top of the packaging, yung fiber, iron, vitamins, and she said that, I think this is nutritious for my child. So she decided to buy the product. So win-win situation, may Batman launcher yung bata, and then the mother has a nutritious food for his child. But during that scenario, walang tao, there's no other person out there, walang salesperson who told them to buy the product. Everything, all the selling decision was done by the packaging. That is why sometimes the packaging is known as the silent salesperson. So packaging is very, very important and very instrumental in trying to get your consumers to buy your products. However, we must also consider the fact that there should be proper label in our packaging. That is why there's what we call the mandatory labeling information. So here I have listed down some of them, like product name, net contents, ingredient list, address of manufacturer, country of origin, etc. And if you want a complete list, you could check the DOH FDA Administrative Order 2014-0030. So most of the SMEs usually don't have this yet, but it would be good especially if you want to level up or to sell in trade shows, exhibits, and malls, that you could comply with the mandatory labeling requirements by FDA. Of course, graphics is very, very important in our packaging, and it's very important for SMEs because it's one way to leverage your target market. Let's have some examples here of packaging which was able to convey special messages to their consumers. Like ito is a cigarette packaging. So as you use the cigarette, the packaging changes as well. So it has a message to convey to the consumers. Here we have active package, it's intelligent and smart packaging pala. Okay? And I think one of the webinars in this series is concerned on that topic. So here just brief bird's eye view of what we call intelligent or smart packaging. So the product there that's pears, hindi po yan avocado, that's pears. There's a red dot in the middle, and that dot will change depending on the condition of the pears. So if it's crispy, kung gusto mo crispy yung pears mo, it's red. If it's juicy, it becomes yellow. The other picture is a milk packaging which changes color as the milk reaches its expiration. So it alerts the consumer that the milk is about to be expired. So ito medyo high level or high tech na mga packaging systems ito, but it's one way to communicate to our consumers. For MSMEs, we have types of layout in our graphics. And there are two main types, the brand name dominant and later the product name dominant. So in the brand name dominant, the element of graphics which is very obvious is actually the name of the brand. So this is very, very common for very established companies. And however, for MSMEs, you should consider if their brand is well known. For MSMEs, you could go for the product name dominant. So in this kind of layout, the name of the product is more prominent compared to the name of the brand or manufacturer. So for example, you have a consumer who wants to buy soy sauce. And let's say the name of your brand is Aling Marie's soy sauce. So if you're going to go for the brand name and you put Aling Marie as a very large font, your consumer may not see the soy sauce which is on little font. So it's better rather to put soy sauce as a larger font so that your consumer could see it immediately if your brand is not well known. So those are the different types of layout, the product name and the brand name dominant. And the last in our 4 functions of packaging is utility. So here we have pictures of dispensing means. That's a spray. We have the middle one is very unique. It's a reclosable can. So if for example, uminom ka ng soda and then hindi mo naubos, you want to return to that later, you could just reclose the packaging. And the third picture there is a multi-pack. So instead of buying 4 items separately, you just buy 1 pack. So that is actually convenient for the consumer. Utility is sometimes known as convenience. So here, adding a dispensing means. This is very common now, especially for alcohol. So we have sprays and pump dispensers to help reduce the human contact in alcohol. Multi-packs is also very common. It's also usual now in our grocery stores, wherein because of the pandemic, our consumers have less trips to the grocery store. So they want to buy everything all at once. And multi-packs actually help in that. And of course, easy to open and easy to reclose types of packaging. They add value to your product. So some consumers would prefer to buy a packaging which can be reclosed versus another packaging which does not have that function. So it's good. So Ziplocs, for example, would be an ideal packaging for reclosability. So to summarize, packaging again is a device that performs one or more of these four basic functions. So even if it's just a label, its performing communication function is still considered part of packaging. However, packaging is not just limited to that definition alone. So most of us, when we think about packaging, yung nasa mind natin is yung box, yung bote, yung plastic, yun lang talaga. But packaging is more than that. It's more than just the box, okay? Packaging is also a process of what? Design, evaluation, production, and operation on packages, and includes as well the transportation and handling. So, to summarize that, we have four main processes under the packaging as a process definition. So first, you development of packages and packaging. So the act of designing the packaging, trying to find out what material to use, that's actually part of development of packaging. Second, production and manufacturing. So from example, from wood to paper, that's still part of packaging. From oil to plastic, that's still part of packaging. SMEs, MSMEs, and SMEs are more concerned with number 3, filling and closing. So if you have your product, how are you supposed to fill that? Okay, if your product is liquid, if your product is heavy, if your product has lots of air, okay, how are you supposed to fill that? And how are you going to close your packaging? If it's bottle, how can you close that? If it's paper, how could you close that? That's also part of the packaging definition. And of course, as mentioned, we will have distribution and handling. And I think we also have a separate webinar in this series on transport packaging. So stay tuned for that part of our series. So here are pictures of different individuals doing packaging as a process. So on your left, we have there doing structural and graphics design in packaging. And on the right, there are packaging for testing and in the production line. So that's actually still part of the packaging process. So again, packaging is not just the product, but it's also the process. Here we have the operations. So the can from the bottom, we'll start from the bottom. The can is being wrapped and then placed on boxes, which is being sealed and then palletized. It's still part of packaging. And again, transportation and warehousing is part of packaging. So by this time, you already know what packaging is. It's not just a finished good, but it's also a process. So moving on to our next topic in our outline, we have levels of packaging. So we have what we call primary packaging, which is actually the packaging which is in direct contact with the product. So this is the packaging that touches your product. So it should be food safe, for example, or it should be compatible with the product. If you have lots of primary packaging, for example, you have 10 packs of the biscuit or cookies that you are making, and you place them in a bigger carton or a bigger pouch. That bigger carton or pouch is now called the secondary packaging. And then if you put a lot of secondary packaging in another bigger pack, it's called tertiary packaging. So that's the level. So primary, secondary, tertiary, and usually the tertiary packaging or the corrugated box is also the shipping container. Let's talk about the different types of packaging. So we have retail, industrial, and military packages. So consumers are more concerned with the retail packaging. It has a lot of graphics, small, and mass-produced. SMEs are also concerned with this because this is what sells the product. Industrial packages have less communication. They're more on the protection side. So it's the packaging that business to business use during their logistics consideration. It tends to be plain and is usually made of corrugated board. And of course, we have military packages, which from the name itself is a very specialized type of packaging. So for our consumers, we are more concerned with the retail packaging. But for MSMEs, we're more concerned with both the retail and the industrial packaging. For example, your raw materials or your ingredients would go to you through the industrial packages. We also talk about packaging materials. So what are the major or the basic packaging materials being used in packaging? Let's start with glass. So I have here listed the advantages and disadvantages of glass. So on the left, those are advantages. On the right, disadvantages. So glass is rigid, it's chemically inert, it's tasteless and odorless, it's transparent so that the consumer could see the product. It has a high quality image, which means it's very good for our premium or luxury products, and it has a universal barrier as well. When we talk about universal barrier, it means it could protect against moisture and oxygen and other gases. So unfortunately, glass is heavy. Manufacturing it is difficult versus other materials because of the needed energy requirement. It's also brittle and easy to break. So here are pictures of packaging packed in glass, usually semi-solids or liquid products. Another material is metal. Like glass, metal is also rigid and it has a universal barrier. In addition, it is not transparent, therefore it's opaque, and that would mean it has very good light barrier. It also has the highest temperature tolerance and physical strength for any packaging material. Unfortunately, for metals, they are subject to corrosion and cross-contamination. So they could rust if they don't have proper coatings. So these are examples of metal. We have here the food and then the beverage can, the tin can, and we have electronic products even placed in metal. And by the way, metal also has some kind of luxury appeal to some consumers. Next packaging material, and this is very common for MSMEs, are paper. So it's cheap, it's lightweight, it's flexible, it can be printed versus other materials. Paper can be easily printed. It can provide stiffness, and of course, it's eco-friendly. Unfortunately, paper has very poor barrier against gas and moisture. So kapag mabasa lang yung papel, obviously, talagang goodbye na yung strength niya at yung barrier niya. So these are examples of paper packaging. Corrugated boxes and cartons and even molded pulp, yung sa egg tray na mga packaging, they're under paper. And finally, plastic, one of the most commonly used packaging. For reasons such as cheap, lightweight, flexible, it's formable, meaning you could have a lot of formats. So there's plastic bottle, plastic crate, plastic tray, plastic bag, and it's economical. It's actually strong and damage resistance, and it can be sealed. So unfortunately, plastic has a negative appeal, especially for environment concerns, because it takes more time to degrade. And a lot of municipalities are now banning plastics. Its properties also change depending on the type of plastic being used. Now for our SMEs, the plastic types that are used are actually PE and PP, that's the general type of plastics. PE means polyethylene and PP means polypropylene. So these are just acronyms for the longer words. So for PE, this is the same plastic used in what we call sando bag and grocery bag. This is cheaper and can be heat sealed easier. PP or polypropylene has a slightly higher barrier compared to PE, but it's more brittle. It can be torn more easily compared to PE. For those SMEs who are buying this type of packaging for their products, you will notice there's also a number after the name, like example, PPO2 or PEO2. So the number is a measure of thickness in what we call mils. Okay? So therefore, at 02, PP02 is equivalent to 2 mils. And 1 mil is actually 1,000th of an inch. So just imagine you have 1 inch, about a thumb, divided into 1,000. That's how thin the material is. So generally, the higher the thickness, the better the properties. So here are examples of plastic being used. We have bags, pouches, and right now I think very common yung plastic tray, yung clamshell packaging, because a lot of individuals are going into baking and then they're selling it online. So we also have what we call laminates, materials composed of different other materials. So a layer of plastic, a layer of paper, and a layer of aluminum. So we call them laminates. So those are the different materials used in packaging, and they are used in a lot of industries. So we will be showing different industries, and your business as an SME could be one of these industries. Starting with the food and beverage, which is the largest market for packaging. This is closely followed by the medical industry, and right now during the COVID crisis, this is actually being placed right in the spotlight. So we have the pharmaceuticals and the medical devices under here. Cosmetics is also an industry where packaging is a very key player, electronic devices, industrial products, and even automotive products. So these are the list of a lot of industries. There are more industries. There are even more specialized like pet foods or veterinary products. They're also listed. So you could see that dangerous goods also here. So in short, packaging engineers are needed in a lot of industries. And that's because everything we use is packaged at some point in its production or its distribution. And therefore, without packaging, life as we enjoy it could not exist. So that's the end of the first part, basic packaging awareness. The second part is now what is the interaction of packaging during the COVID pandemic. So we will now discuss how COVID had affected packaging and what had been packaging been doing to help ease the COVID situation. So these are our outline stages of the pandemic, role of packaging, the impact of COVID, and we will end here with a packaging development basics for our SMEs who are affected by the pandemic. Hopefully you could learn something from there to help you with your business. Let's start first. So stages of the pandemic. According to an article published by McKinsey & Company, packaging demand is expected to move through 3 phases during the outbreak. And what are those 3 phases? First, we'll get the initial shock. Then we'll try to keep the situation under control. And finally, we'll rebound. So in each stage, there is a different demand for packaging and different effect on packaging. Phase 1 is the initial shock wherein everyone was suddenly could not believe what's happening in the world. Okay? So there were restrictions, travel bans, lockdowns, and everyone was panic buying and hoarding. So a lot of behavior of our consumer changed during the initial shock. And some industries actually lose more than others. However, some segments like food and pharmaceutical industries, they continue to see a robust demand, and this is even accentuated by hoarding and panic buying. So we have seen that in the news, everyone is buying alcohol and tissue and toilet paper and even food products. So that's the initial shock. On the industrial scale, the crude oil prices fall. Since oil is used as the raw material for plastics, the materials for plastic resin or the cost for plastic resins is also likely to fall. And finally, the closures of the borders can lead to challenges for the supply chain. So even though there is unhampered movement of essential goods, still there are challenges in the supply chain. So for SMEs, what does this mean? During that time, you had challenges with both their consumer and supplier because everyone is in their homes. There is now less consumers, and because our suppliers are also trying to cut off their workforce, there might be less supply. That was the initial challenge for our SMEs. Our trade shows and exhibits get cancelled. So a lot of SMEs are joining trade shows and exhibits, but because there is no mass gathering, they get cancelled. And on the bright side, opportunities for the food e-commerce sector begins to rise at this stage. Now, after the world has gotten over the initial shock, they start to bring the situation under control. So during this time, and I think we're still, for me, I think we're still in phase 2. We have not yet finished phase 2. We're still trying to keep the situation under control. And during this phase, stockpiling and hoarding now begin to slow down. Okay. As everyone started to remain calm, they start to slow down. However, e-commerce accelerates at a very fast rate during this phase. And therefore, the packaging focus now diverts to online selling, like unboxing, to-go, and deliveries. Shelf-stable goods, especially those used for relief, find demand. So we have your instant noodles or canned tuna, canned sardines. So they find good demand. Consumers become concerned about safety and hygiene of packaged goods. So they become, we could say that praning, especially when they buy from groceries. Okay. Single-use packaging will rise due to safety concerns and the new mode of selling and delivery. So the online selling gave rise to single-use packaging. We were actually on the move of trying to phase them out, but during the pandemic, there was a sudden increase in single-use packaging because of the situation. And unfortunately, some companies go bankrupt. For our SMEs, some of you may have higher demand, like for example, face masks. Those who are sewing and selling face masks. The vitamins and food industries are also still having high demands. E-commerce is has reached its peak and it stays there. And as SMEs, of course, you should also consider now protocols for hygiene and safety, especially in your locations and your packaging processes. There are demands for specific goods that will rise as people find alternative ways of generating income. However, the rise of that demand will also lead to a shortage of supply. For example, baking needs and clamshell packaging. I have friends who went to this and they told me they find it hard to buy clamshell packaging and some ingredients because of the high demand of those packaging. And we could use the phase 2 as a time to prepare for the phase 3, which is rebound. So phase 2 should not be a time to be idle. We could prepare now for the rebound. So what happens in rebound? So packaging demand will gradually return. So they will not return at the same rate. Some sectors like food will have a rapid rebound. So everyone will miss eating at restaurants, for example, and they will go there, or they could produce more. Other sectors will have a slower rebound, like luxury products. That's because some of the consumers have been affected financially by the crisis. They are still not so sure about cashing out large amounts of money. Consumers will still be wary in terms of safety and hygiene, and e-commerce may continue to prevail. So that will still happen in the rebound phase. So what is it for SMEs? How could you prepare for that? First, protocols for hygiene and safety should be in place. That would be complying, I think, also with the legal requirements of businesses. The return of consumer demand and or availability of supply. Since the restrictions have been lifted, there will now be more consumers and more supplies. Competition with online sellers may rise, especially for those who had a nice breakthrough during the crisis. So it could be a good thing to consider e-commerce, which still remains a viable option. And of course, as businesses, we could consider ways to redeem lost profit. So what had packaging done during that time? So knowing those three phases, we already done with initial shock, and we're under the currently trying to keep the situation under control. And during that time, packaging had silently helped during the crisis. First and foremost is what we call the medical device packaging. So usually, even in schools and in other seminars, we talk more of the food packaging and the medical packaging. But for medical devices, they had their shine, their spotlight during this pandemic. Why is that so? Most of our test kits have to be packaged in specialized packaging. So there are handling requirements, there are special packaging requirements, and even the personnel who prepares and packs them should be properly trained. So I was not able to actually see how it's being done in the medical field, but my medical personnel had told me they're specialized packaging and they should be properly trained to handle that. That also includes PPEs. So it's more than just masks. Even the bunny suits, for example, should also be packaged well. Samples like blood, swab test samples, or other samples should be considered. Should also consider the logistics, not just of the biologics concerned or the medical devices, but even the logistics of, let's say, hospital equipment, which is now being bought in large amounts today. Testing for these packages is also in high demand. So the pouch should be able to protect the product. We could not risk having a faulty packaging, which could lead to a faulty product. And of course, some products need to be sterilized, and therefore the packaging should also survive the sterilization process. So some are sprayed, some are gas flushed, so the packaging should be able to survive that. For the consumer sector, the retail sector, and government, packaging is needed for the distribution of shelf-stable relief goods. We were able to experience that when our leaders gave their ayuda or yung mga relief goods nila. So we have canned goods, for example, and canned is better because of longer shelf life. Size and convenience matters. Okay, so they could not just give us a very large can, but they have to portion size it so that all families could receive. We have package protection is also very important. So hindi naman pwede na yung plastic bag for the rice is very thin. So when you carry it, na butas yung plastic bag, syempre nawala or natapon yung rice. So it should have good protective functions. And some packaging can extend the shelf life of perishables, especially for our fresh fruits and vegetables. E-commerce packaging also played a role during this time. So that includes to-go packaging during delivery. And I want to highlight the second bullet, visibly striking packaging for online selling. For online sellers, only have the online platform like social media to sell their products. So the consumer could not have a free taste, could not hear, could not touch that, but they could see that. Therefore, packaging is very visual, and since most of our consumers are now visual, it plays a very, very important role. So the better looking your packaging, usually the more eye-catching it is for our consumers. Other than that, if you're into online selling, the packaging should be durable to survive the small parcel transport environment. A study showed that the packaging for online sellers should be 3 to 4 times stronger than the usual packaging which is being used in our retail stores. And of course, again, transport packaging will still continue to deliver, be it logistical, high-class logistics, like the picture on the left, or our current transport packaging for agri-products, like the one on our right. They still continue to deliver during the pandemic. Now, what about the other way around? What had COVID done on packaging? So first, trends will change. In the same article by McKinsey and Company, they were able to graph the potential impact of packaging as we go through before, during, and after the pandemic. So they labeled that as the next normal. So during the first row there is about sustainability or being eco-friendly. Before pandemic, everyone wants that, going green. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, because of the rise of single-use plastics and single-use packaging, there was a decrease in the trend of sustainability. So it is expected to increase again after the situation has leveled off and we are now in the rebound. But for now, we're all buying takeouts, for example, so there are single-use plastics. There's a new trend which appeared, which was not there before the pandemic, and that would be increased in hygiene concerns of our consumers. So I'm very sure when you buy your groceries, you wash them or you put alcohol on them before you actually use them. And that's evident because during pandemic, everyone is very, very concerned about their hygiene and safety. In the next normal, it showed that it might decrease a bit, but I think some of us will still be worried about hygiene concerns. E-commerce has been consistent before, during, and even after pandemic. E-commerce will still continue to prevail. The next row, consumer preference changes. So we've discussed that already. They now prefer e-commerce. They now prefer online selling, online buying. They want the packaging to be clean and sanitized. The last two rows, there are more for the bigger companies, wherein they could now digitize their supply chain and they could consider ways to redeem their profit margins. So for MSMEs, you could still use that. So this is a graph of what is expected to happen. Of course, consistently, e-commerce packaging will still continue to boom. And again, as I've said, because our consumers are very visual, the better looking the packaging is on the screen, on the mobile phone, on social media, the more engaged the consumer will be. Consumer behavior changes, so we have hygiene and safety concerns. We'll put what we call antimicrobial packaging. We actually have that term, antimicrobial packaging, which actually kills the virus. So the material could be coated or impregnated by an antiviral agent. And there was also a study or a prediction that consumers may prioritize local products because of the economic effect of the pandemic. Consumers will start to prioritize local products, and I think that's a very good move. And of course, there will be a lot of innovations in packaging. So I'm going to present to you some pictures of unique packaging concepts which can be used during the pandemic. And the source here is in Packaging Digest. So we have here what we call InvisiShield. So this is what we call controlled atmosphere packaging, wherein it releases an antipathogenic agent which kills microbes in there. So far, when I researched on this, it did not mention coronavirus, but still it could kill a lot of microbes. So it's not yet commercially available. It's still being under study, but it could be one way to make sure that the products we have are safe and hygienic. We also have this still in the hygiene category, Skin for Can. So there's a plastic covering the entire can so that when the consumer will drink it, will just tear the plastic covering and then drink. There's no dust or contamination on the metal itself because it has been protected. Another related innovation is what we call the paperboard topper. So we have there in the product shown on the screen that the top part of the can where we drink is protected as well. Furthermore, it has an added convenience function because it is a multi-pack. Supermarkets and groceries are also changing from bulk size to portion size. So some supermarkets have bulk products there wherein you just press a lever. For example, your rice and grains, you press a lever and then the product will fall into a plastic bag or a basket. But because of hygiene concerns, they started to shift now to portion sizes. The rise of single-use packaging also gave another alternative for eco-friendly to-go packaging. So for those who are still concerned with environment, at the same time wants to deliver convenience, we have eco-friendly to-go packaging. And we have this one, another hygienic packaging, one-hand dispensing to avoid cross-contamination. So it could be soap, lotion, and I think some powders are also contained in the packaging. So these are still concepts which are being explored. So with all these changes, SMEs should be prepared for the rebound stage. And packaging is one element that could be essential to their business. So as we are now experiencing the phase 2, we have enough time to prepare for the rebound. And because this is a topic on packaging, we have a special topic for SMEs, packaging development, so it could help you rebound. So what is packaging development? It's a development of a new package for a proven product or modifying an existing package for an existing product. So it could be two ways. You might have a new product and there's no existing packaging. You could create a new package. That's called development. Or second situation, you have an existing product and you want to improve it, so you design or you redesign or revamp the packaging. That is still part of packaging development. So packaging development is enhancement and improvement being done on the packaging, including the material, the structure, the process, and the graphics design. So on the picture there, they are all one product, so nuts, but they are packaged differently, and each one has a different appeal to the consumer. So that is packaging development. So I have here samples from our university, which have been done by our students for actual SMEs. So we have here a mango puree, okay? So from pouch to bottle. We have here banana chips. From pouch to redesign the graphics, became a stand-up pouch. We have here mango juice drink. Also, they redesigned the graphics. So we have here a pancit canton. So they also redesigned. So some of these products may be very similar to the products of SMEs. And you could just, with a little bit of creativity, you could actually redesign your product so that it could have more value in the market. So packaging development has three areas actually. So we have structural package rather. We have engineering package and graphical package. Now for SMEs, we're more concerned with number 3, graphical packaging design. The number 1 and 2 are actually being explored by larger companies. For structural packaging design, you change actually the material of your packaging. But for SMEs, we don't usually do that because most of the time, SMEs just look for a supplier. The supplier will give a product catalog and the SME would just choose one of those products. But in bigger companies, they actually change and study on the material and format. The second one is more on the process, so machinery, processing, engineering. So I think some SMEs have machinery already. You could still explore that. But for majority of you, I think most of you are more concerned with your graphics and your labels. So we will put focus on number 3, graphical packaging design. So why is it critical? Because it provides a medium for presenting advertising messages and other important information. And again, it's very important now in e-commerce, wherein the visual look of the packaging influences a consumer's decision to buy the product. So every time your consumers buy online, they actually take a picture of it and they post it. That's actually more publicity. Or they take a video of how they unbox the product. They call that the unboxing videos, which could, again, be a marketing function. So most of the graphics and information are presented in our label. So we have that there in the picture. And I will talk about the basic labeling formats, which are common and which can be used by our MSMEs. So first, direct labeling. So we have here pictures of some products with direct labels. So the material here is paperboard, and you just print directly on the paper or paperboard. But what is unique here is that they were able to use the product as part of the design element. So there's just a window on the packaging, and then the product will fill in this case, the hair and the teeth. You just fill in those windows, and you've got a nice looking packaging. So MSMEs could actually explore that particular packaging creative design. This one is printed on glass, the ceramic labeling. It's more expensive for MSMEs. Direct print on plastics is also expensive. Usually they have a minimum order quantity which is larger, which are rather very large for SMEs. But if you want, you could consider that option. Most of our direct print will be on paper. The second type of label is what we call the sticker or stick-on labels. So it's different than direct print because you actually print on paper or sticker, and that you just attach that label to your actual packaging. So you could put glue or you could just use a sticker paper. So we have there examples of stick-on labels. So here we have some other examples. So instead of just printing a rectangular label, you could try some designs. Like in this one, in the transparent clamshell or transparent tubs, they actually use sticker label to convey information and then to provide some tamper-evident feature and to help close the lid of the cover. So it's like two shots in one stone, two birds in one stone rather, or even more. So simple label, but it has a lot of functions. So you could do that in your packaging design. Another you can do is headers and hang tabs, wherein you put it on the top of your design. So even the last picture is just a regular craft bag, but they just put a design on the top, so it could provide branding for your business. Sleeves are also common, so you just print a whole, paperboard, turn into a whole looking thing, and then you put your packaging inside that. You insert the packaging and you already have a sleeve label. So I like this one, the picture on the left. It's an egg packaging. So the packaging is actually just newspaper, old newspaper. It was just some origami and folding, and you have a case, and then you put the eggs there. But the marketing function is by the sleeves. So they just printed. It's actually black and white. So I think it's not really costly, and then they just inserted it, and you were able to actually make the egg look better, and hopefully more consumers could buy that. The last one is inserts. I don't have a picture for the inserts, but it's just you print it and then you just insert it inside the packaging along with the product. So a lot of SMEs do that, but there are hygiene and contamination concerns regarding that, especially for the ink of your labels. So some use inserts and then they seal it separately in the plastic or in the packaging. But all these 5 could be possible ways to level up your product as we prepare for the new normal. So for example, we have there a product which is actually pusit. So it's just D-list and pusit. So it's not really something that would actually sell on a luxury market, but given the change in packaging, you could make it look more premium. So that's how important and effective packaging could be for your business. So a tiny label, a small sticker, or even a simple ribbon can make all the difference in your product. So to summarize everything we have learned, packaging can actually help our SMEs here in the Philippines rebound after this COVID crisis. So to end this presentation, let me just read a quote. As we brace for the rebound and meet the new normal, let us work hand in hand to reshape the world, one package at a time. And so once again, in behalf of the DOST, so we thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to be able to share our knowledge here at Packaging Engineering Department of Central Philippine University and share it nationwide to our small and medium enterprises. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sir Ron Jonaldo. Several travel restrictions, checkpoints, and border controls during this pandemic caused delays in the shipment of food products to different destinations. With this, our knowledge about transport packaging is necessary to make sure that food products will reach our target market safe, stable, and in good quality. To discuss the basics of transport packaging, let us all welcome our expert, Engineer Bernie C. Cangrejo, Chairperson, Packaging Engineering Department, College of Engineering, Central Philippine University.
Good day everyone. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Today's lecture series topic on packaging is Packaging 101, Basics of Transport Packaging. So this would be like a continuation of the first topic for Packaging 101, which was fundamentals of packaging. So for basics of transport packaging, so this would be the objectives. So number one, Our aim is to give a general overview about transport packaging and also give the basic concepts of transport packaging. At the same time, to give awareness to the value of transport packaging, because chances are in most of the focus of SMEs, for example, would be on the primary packaging, but oftentimes transport packaging can also add or can also improve or can also lower the cost or increase the profit ng sa mga SMEs po natin. So let me start by showing you po mga pictures ng damage due to transport or during distribution. So we have like for example, fresh produce, madali pong masira pag hindi po tama at hindi po angkop and effective yung transport packaging na gamit po natin. So ang mga fruits po pwedeng magkaroon ng bruises, pwedeng magkaroon ng molds, pwedeng dahil sa temperature ng environment, magkaroon ng sira po ang ating mga produkto, especially po mga vegetables and fruits. And at the same time, even our products that are already packaged with primary packaging can also be damaged. So like for example, cans due to compression can actually deform, and even yung mga glass containers natin mabasag po dahil hindi po tama yung gamit po natin or hindi po natin na wasto ang ating transport packaging. So sayang po naman yung mga magagandang designs o yung mga graphics po natin sa ating primary packaging kung hindi naman po makarating sa kung saan po siya i-display or saan po siya ibebenta because of the transport packaging being used is not effective or not optimum po. And this would be pictures also of damage due to transport, and here you can see that the damage may be found on the transport packaging or yung container po mismo, and at the same time sa product. In fact, maraming pagkakataon po na kahit yung product pa sa loob hindi po na damage, but then yung packaging po, like yung karton po o yung corrugated box po ay na-damage, chances are the customer or the client will no longer accept or will no longer pay for the product because of the damaged transport packaging and not necessarily po the product. So ang mga kadahilanan po ng mga damage ay dahil po sa compression, hindi po nakaya ng ating transport packaging yung bigat, pwedeng sa vibration po during transport, kaya nagkabagsakan, nagkahiwa-hiwalay po ang ating mga packaging during distribution. And even like for bulk transport, yung mga produkto po natin na nakakarga po sa ships, even sa planes, even sa malalaking trucks po, pag hindi po nagamitan ng tamang transport packaging, losses would be very high. So pag nasira ang isang buong truck, for example, and that would mean lots of losses for the company. So let's start with some basic definitions and basic concepts on transport packaging. So the first question is, what is transport packaging? So let me just go back and review the four basic packaging functions. So we have number one, ang gamit po ng packaging is to protect and preserve. Ang pangalawang gamit po ng packaging is for convenience and utility. And ang pangatlong gamit po is para magbigay ng information and to increase the sales through marketing. And I think these have all been discussed in the first lecture series for Packaging 101. But then, the fourth packaging function na napakahalaga din po is yung containment and, of course, transport. So without packaging po, hindi po natin ma-deliver, hindi po natin madala yung ating produkto sa origin papunta sa destination pag wala po tayong packaging. Okay? So, ang purpose po ng packaging, specifically po sa transport packaging, is that the goods should be delivered. So yung purpose of transport packaging is to enable goods to be delivered to the point where they are wanted in the right amount, in the right condition, at the right time, and at the right cost. Na yung ating pong mga produkto ay ating ma-deliver in the right amount, sa tamang dami po, hindi po sobra, hindi po kulang, sa tamang kondisyon po, hindi po basag, hindi po basa, and sa tamang panahon, hindi po late at hindi naman po too early. At ang pinaka-importante po sa lahat, of course, sa tamang cost, hindi po mahal. So, ano po yung transport packaging? So, when we say transport packaging, we actually mean also distribution packaging. So, transport packaging is also known as shipping container. So, pare-pareho lang po yung tatlo. So, yung transport packaging po, o distribution packaging or shipping container is a shipping unit that provides containment and protection to goods during handling, storage, and transportation. And of course, yung picture po dyan is a corrugated box karton, at yan po ang pinaka-common po na gamit natin na transport packaging. In fact, more than 90% of the shipping containers used would be that of a corrugated box. So, as I have mentioned already, these are now examples of our transport packaging or shipping containers. So, yung pinaka-popular po is the corrugated box, and yung kanya pong mga advantages and disadvantages were actually discussed also during the first lecture, because corrugated boxes are made up of paper. So, yung properties po ng corrugated natin would be also the advantages and disadvantages of the packaging material, which is for paper. And then number one po doon, of course, is it is cheap and it is lightweight. Another example po ng shipping container po natin, or magbigay po ako ng example ng ating shipping container, especially during this times po natin sa pandemic, na uso po ngayon itong mga meal boxes or meal kits. So, nauso po yung e-commerce, nauso po yung food delivery, for example. So, yung corrugated box, ginagamit na siya as a transport packaging. So, pwede siyang lagyan ng iba't ibang packaged products inside during delivery, for example. So, very convenient po yung corrugated box po. Another example of your shipping containers would be the wooden containers or the wooden box. So ito po ay ginagamit, and I think many of you have already seen or might have used this type of container. So sa mga fresh produce po natin, pwedeng sa fruits, sa vegetables, at kung iba-iba pang product, ito din po ay isa sa mga options po natin for our transport packaging. Another example would be our drums and pails. So pag maramihan po yung ating gustong i-transport o i-ship po ng mga liquid products or even mga powdered products po, so we can make use of drums and pails po. Another type of transport packaging would be our shipping sacks. So, merong maliliit, merong malalaki, depende po sa kung anong produkto po ang ating gustong i-transport tsaka i-ship. Another example would be for shipping containers would be the so-called IBCs. Ito po yung intermediate bulk containers. So, kadalasan ito po ay kombinasyon. Like for example, you have a box and then it would be placed on a pallet or it would be placed on a metal frame. So intermediate bulk containers po siya kasi pwede po ito na malipat-lipat. So like from the truck, ilipat po siya sa plane and then baba na naman sa plane, lipat sa truck, lipat po sa ship. Pag ito ay nakadesign po na intermediate bulk container, mas madali po siya na i-transfer. Another example of a shipping container would be your pallets. Ito yung mga paleta. So I think this has been discussed as one of the unitizing method for our primary packaging. So yung paleta po nakakatulong para ma-unitize po natin. So sa isang bit-bit lang po ng forklift, for example, you can already carry like 50 sacks or 100 boxes, for example, and that is mainly due to a pallet. So ang paleta po ay kinoconsider po natin as one kind of shipping container. So, in the case, for example, dito po sa atin sa Pilipinas, ito po yung mga, I think, ang ilan po sa mga common containers that we see in the market. So, very popular na rin po yung mga reusable na mga plastic trays. Andyan pa rin po yung mga boxes. And then, meron pa tayong mga native na mga containers like yung mga kaing po, for example, na still prevalent pa rin po or still being used in many markets, especially po sa mga rural areas po. And then I think one observation that I can make and one trend also with regard to shipping containers, like for example, for our reusable trays and even for corrugated boxes, that they are now, aside from being used as shipping containers, they can also being used also as a display container. So after na ginamit siya or ginamit po siya para mag-ship and then mag-transport and then pagdating po sa destination, pwede na rin siya ulit magamit pa as a display container. So like I have seen some shipping containers being printed with graphics design because as not only as shipping containers but they now become also as display containers. Another definition of transport packaging is that it would encompass or it would include all industrial packaging and the shipping containers for consumer products. So yung mga examples po na binigay ko earlier would be some of the most common. But included in the transport packaging po would be even the damages. O ito po yung mga cushioning materials na ginagamit po natin sa ating transport packaging. They are still part of our transport packaging system. So like in the picture, or sa pictures po, meron po tayong mga insulating boxes, meron po tayong mga foams, meron po tayong mga materials that would be used for cushioning like bubble wraps. So bahagi din po sila ng ating transport packaging. So I'll just make a quick review po ng levels of packaging. So we have the primary packaging. So yun po yung packaging na in contact ng ating product. And then the primary packaging like here would be say paper and or maybe a foil or maybe a plastic film. And then ilalagay po siya sa secondary package, which in this case would be like a box, like a cardboard box. And then, yung cardboard box po, pag gusto na po nating i-ship, ilalagay po natin sa ating transport packaging or distribution packaging or shipping container or shipper po ang tawag po nila sa industry. And we can make use of our pallet. So, ang mga boxes po natin, yung corrugated boxes po na shippers po natin, pwede po natin malagay and then ma-unitize using our pallet, which is the most common way of unitizing our shipping containers. So, like, if we will further explain the levels of packaging and the role of our transport packaging, so we have po in this in the picture shown, so we have the primary packaging, and that is basically where you make use of all your designs for marketing. So yung mga graphics po natin, mga labels po natin, we say we design it. And then, pwede po nating ilagay sa ating secondary packaging na corrugated box, for example, and so we pack it using our shipping container, and then we can unitize, making use of our pallets, and then strapping, for example, and finally we can load it to a ship, to our carrier. Maybe it is a truck, maybe it is a plane, or maybe it is a ship. So yung distribution packaging po natin o transport packaging, you might be confused because sometimes in the previous example, ang ating pong transport packaging ay tertiary na po siya kasi meron ng primary, secondary, and then tertiary na po ang ating transport packaging. But for this particular example, ang ating transport packaging po ay secondary kasi po yung ating primary packaging is right away placed inside a shipping container. So, pwedeng ang ating shipping container can actually be the what? Depending on the applications, can be already the primary packaging, can be the secondary packaging, or can even be the tertiary packaging, our transport packaging. Okay? And so we have the unitized and palletized packaging. And finally, sa pangbultuhan po, for bulk packaging and sa pangmaramihan po, we can make use of containerized packaging. So the term transport packaging would not only define the transport packaging material itself, but it would also refer to the process. So transport packaging would refer to the process of integrated package and product handling from factory to point of sale in the distribution environment. So in this particular example po, this would be like the cold chain process. So, starting from the production zone, in this case, meron pong piggery. Okay, so this would be like meat product or processed meat. So from production, ilipat sa processing, and then ipunta sa supermarkets, and then delivered to the consumers, or maybe delivered to the retailers. So this would constitute po transport packaging. And as you can see, this would be like one example of distribution environment. Another example or another concept for transport packaging is the design. the concern. So as I have mentioned, or as I have now emphasized, na yung transport packaging is very important, is very critical. And so the question now is, how do you come up with an effective, with an appropriate, with a good transport packaging? So when we do transport packaging, for example, so we are obviously concerned with the economics, yung economical preparation. At the same time, combine that with the protection function of the packaging. So kailangang hindi siya mahal, na kayang gawin yung functions ng ating packaging, specifically po sa protection aspect po na function ng packaging. So like for example here, as you can see in the picture, so meron po tayong mga products that are being transported by a truck, and then you can see the arrangement inside. So like the question would be, is this the best way already to arrange? Is this already the best way to make use of transport packaging? And at the same time, the question would be, are the products already best protected in this particular setup of the transport packaging? So as I have mentioned, these are now the objectives and the goals po of transport packaging. So number one would be product protection, of course. And then another one would be ease of handling and storage. So nakakatulong po ang ating transport packaging pag maganda at tama po yung design ng ating transport packaging, na maging madali po ang pag-handle, ang pag-store, and even pag-transport and distribute po ng ating products. Also would be the so-called shipping effectiveness. So pag correct po ang design ng ating packaging, mas effective po yung shipping in terms of the cost, na ma-maximize po natin yung space ng ating mga transport carriers if we were able to come up with a best design packaging. Also manufacturing efficiency, na madali pong i-manufacture ang ating transport packaging, and even in relation po also sa products natin, na mas mabilis, madali i-manufacture pag yung packaging na gamit natin for transport, which can even be used within the manufacturing site already. And then another would be the ease of identification. So pag okay po yung design ng ating packaging, madali siyang ma-identify pag kompleto po yung mga labels ng ating transport packaging. And then it would satisfy the needs of the clients or the customers, and added to that would be the environmental responsibility. And if I may add also, during this pandemic, I think pwede po nating madagdag yung safety aspect po ng ating transport packaging when it comes to hygiene din po, and then cleanliness po, and then being free from contamination po ang ating transport packaging. So I say now that the transport packaging would be most useful in the retention and containment of the product to facilitate distribution. So para hindi po magkalat at hindi po masayang o mawala ang ating mga produkto. Yan po ang isang purpose ng packaging. And of course, yung protection po ng ating product sa mga damages because of the distribution hazards from the environment. And if I may also highlight this quote, that your transport packaging does not add value but instead conserves the value of the product. So dahil po sa transport packaging, yung ating produkto po hindi nagiging mas valuable, pero yung value ng product po ay nasa-save or nako-conserve dahil po sa tamang transport package. So like for example, pag yung transport packaging nyo po ay hindi tama, instead po na tig 100 pesos po, for example, yung value ng produkto na nasa loob, pag hindi tama po ang inyong transport packaging at masira at ma-damage po yung produkto, hindi nyo na po pwede silang mabenta at 100 pesos dahil nasira na nga po. Pero ang produkto po na 100 pesos na nakalagay po sa tamang transport packaging would still retain, magiging 100 pesos pa rin po ang kanyang price kasi po na-conserve ng tamang transport packaging yung value po ng product. And of course, ang transport packaging po natin would influence the cost, as I have mentioned already, the convenience, and of course, the safety ng pag-handle, pag-store, and then pag-transport po ng ating mga produkto. In fact, yung related po sa cost, it is known that about 1/3 of the cost for all packaging materials is in the form of distribution packaging. Lalo na po pag nag-expand na po yung ating company, pagbaramihan na po ang ating mga tinatransport ng mga products, mas lalong nagiging importante po yung silbi ng ating transport packaging. So, how about now yung pag-design po ng ating transport packaging? So, as I have mentioned earlier, pag nag-design po tayo ng ating transport packaging, it would focus on the protection, of course. Ma-protect po ba? Maprotektahan ba ng tama ng ating i-design na transport packaging ang ating product? From the hazards of handling, storage, and shipping, at the same time, hindi sa tamang halaga, or is it at the right cost or at the optimum cost po yung ating transport packaging. And so when it comes, for example, to the economics, so aside from the cost of the material, so other costs that might be significant also would be the labor cost and then the damage cost, and I will have more of that later po. So pag nag-design po tayo ng transport packaging or pag nag-aral po tayo ng ating transport packaging, ito po yung 3 basic areas of concern so that we will be able to come up with a successful and optimum transport packaging design and solution po sa ating produkto. Number 1 is alamin ang distribution environment. Number 2, alamin po ang inyong produkto. And number 3, alamin po ang tamang packaging. So the transport packaging design is given by a very simple equation, which is product plus package is equal to the environment, which I would further expound and explain in the next slides po. So we start with the first area of concern, which is the environment, which I already gave a background po, yung ating distribution environment. So when it comes to the distribution environment, yung pinaka objective po natin is to measure or to know the severity or harshness of the distribution environment. Gaano ba severe, gaano ba mapanira ang ating distribution environment. Pag laman po natin ito, mas madali po nating ma-design ng maayos ang ating transport packaging. So, when we talk of environment, we mean our distribution environment and we mean our physical distribution environment, which would refer now to the movement of finished goods outward from the manufacturer's assembly line to the consumer or the buyer of the product. So like in the figure, meron po tayong produkto, bago pa ito makarating sa ating consumer, it will have to go through or pass through the physical distribution environment, and we should know the information or lahat about the distribution environment. So this would be like another diagram from the manufacturer to the consumer. Pwedeng palipat-lipat po ang ating produkto. So pwedeng dadaan siya through shipping, transport, or transport by sea, transport by land, transport by air. So iba-iba po. So maraming unique na distribution environment sa kanya-kanyang mga sa iba't ibang produkto produkto din po sa atin. And especially here in the Philippines that we are archipelagic, for example, so marami pong dinadaanan na mga transport modes ang ating pong produkto mula sa factory or mula po sa ating source ng or mula sa paggawaan ng ating product up to the consumer or the retail stores, for example. So this would be now for a much larger scale, so pwedeng yung inyong distribution environment would be already global. So from one country to another country, so you can have a global supply chain, and obviously more complex would be the distribution environment, but still the basic principle is learn about your distribution environment later for the design of our transport packaging. So in this case, from one continent to another continent, the distribution of the product, which should be the strawberries. Or you can have a package delivery system, a small parcel delivery system, which is now very common for e-commerce. So if nagpa-deliver po tayo through online shopping, for example, so chances are this would be the mode of distribution. So this would be like another example of a distribution in the environment. In the case, for example, of the SMEs, I think hindi po ganito or hindi mas simple po and not so complicated would be our distribution environment for SMEs. So for the distribution environment, we can check or we can enumerate yung tatlong components of the distribution environment, mainly po the handling, the storage, and the transportation. For the handling, so this would be during loading and unloading, so we can have mechanical handling, or we can also make use of manual handling. So in most cases, for example, I think manual handling po madalas yung gamit po natin. For the storage, this is also your warehousing. So, pag in-store mo po ang ating mga produkto, ano po naman yung mga possible damage na mangyari o ano yung mga hazards that would be present during storage or during warehousing. So, I think one example would be yung sa compression po. Since more po tayo muna ngayon sa awareness, so we can discuss maybe sometime or in the future yung details po ng mga specific po ng mga hazards. So like even how to compute po yung safe stock height, ilang boxes po ba yung pwede po nating ma-stack para hindi po masira yung product or hindi masira yung package. So meron po tayong mga computations or meron po tayong mga calculations para doon. And then the third component of the distribution environment is related to the transport itself or the movement. So ito na po yung ating modes of transport and then types of movement and types of carriers. So like in the picture, so pwede pong sa jeepney, pwede po sa ships, pwede po sa trucks, pwede po sa tren na mga carriers po. So for the distribution environment, so in the transport aspect, kasi meron pong movement sa road, sa rail, sa sea and air, kadalasan damage would happen. And in fact, it is considered that the damage during transport or during transit is one of the oldest problems in packaging because of the different hazards encountered in the transport environment. So examples would be, so if we will examine closer to home, so in the case of road transport, tricycles, vehicles, tricycle po, yung mga jeepney po. So some of the hazards would be vibration, bouncing of the load, water, dust, which would depend also on the carrier at the same time sa road conditions po. And you know how it is with regard to yung mga transport vehicles po natin sa Philippines. If you would like, if you would notice in the third picture, so loading po, which I think now would be bawal na yung social distancing po. And then for road transport, so this would be now very popular or very common ngayong pandemic po. So we have like sa delivery po natin, either naka-motorcycle or may mga pick-up trucks or na nagta-transport and nagde-deliver po ng ating mga produkto. For rail transport or tren po, so hazards would include shunting, shocks, pag nagtigil po o nagpreno po o pag stop po ang ating tren, nagkakaroon po ng shunting tsaka ng shock, and even pag nag-connect po ng mga bagon po ng tren, nagkakaroon ng so-called natin na snatching, and even the vibration. So I think you have experienced riding a truck or riding a jeepney, and I think you have also experienced riding the rail, and so what you experience would chances are what the package and what the product would also experience. The next type of transport or mode of transport would be water transport, which is also very common here in the Philippines. So merong malalaki, merong maliliit, meron po tayong RoRo water transport, and so still yung mga hazard po, vibration, pitching and rolling po ng vessel, and even moisture or even init or ulan pag na-transport na siya using po ng sea or using po ng mga barko or mga sasakyang pandagat. And then the last type would be the air transport. So if here in the Philippines, we often use air transport, and also if you would do exporting, for example, so you have to do air transport. So again, vibration would be present, and then another would be the low pressure, kasi po pressurized karamihan po ng ating mga airplanes, and so that would have an effect on your packaging, especially po pag flexible ang inyong product, and even the temperatures, if your products are pressure sensitive, your packaging are pressure sensitive and even temperature sensitive, and so that would be factors that can have an impact on the design of our packaging. So like the common distribution hazards, so these are the most common physical or mechanical hazards. So we can in fact do computations, we can do calculations, we can do design problems on these mechanical hazards, because the science and the principles for most of these mechanical hazards are already complete. So for compression, that would be due to stacking during storage. So pag we stack the packages po, so pwedeng makompress, mayupi po ang ating mga boxes during storage. Another one would be shock during handling. Pag nahulog po ang ating product, pag nabitiwan po or nalaglag po sa ating forklift po, that would create damage. And so we can actually predict, we already have testing procedures, and we also have design procedures for this type of hazards when we do the design of the transport packaging, and even for vibration during transport. So we can study, for example, yung sabi po natin that we should learn about our environment. So learn ano po yung mga frequencies po ng ating na present po sa ating distribution environment, and by knowing the frequencies, you can also come up with packaging that would be able to withstand, or that would be able to mitigate the effect po ng vibration related to frequencies during transport. So just to again review, yung mga distribution hazards po natin, they can be classified into five major categories. We have the mechanical, climatic, biological, contamination, and pilferage. In the case of mechanical, so nasabi na po natin, yung very common po ito, vibration, compression, deformation, puncturing. For climatic, that would be exposure to moisture, yung mga temperature changes, pressure changes po, if there would be changes in altitude, even the effects of light. And for biological, which is now I think very significant, would be contamination with viruses, microorganisms, or fungi, the effect of molds, even insects, flies, termites, and rodents and other animals. And then contamination related to leakage, spillage, radioactivity, and then pilferage. So would our distribution environment be susceptible to stealing or looting, for example? So these are some of the distribution hazards that at least you need to know when you study the environment of your transport packaging. So I say now that if you don't know or if you lack the understanding about the distribution environment, that would lead to damage, and that would lead also to waste. That would lead to damage due to a poorly packaged product, and that would lead to waste due to excessive packaging because you were not able to know about your distribution environment. The second aspect or the second concern in the design of our transport packaging would be related to the product. After knowing the information about the environment, now know your product. So in the case of the product, we will measure or we will consider the fragility, the sensitivity, or the ruggedness of the product. And so an example that I have shown here would be like if you have a soft bread versus a hard bread, for example. So if you have mamon and then you have bizcocho, for example, obviously the property of the product would also affect the type of packaging that you would use. So obviously, pag yung product rugged na po mismo o matigas na, you don't need much say for example cushioning material kasi nga matigas na mismo yung product mo. And so that would be very important, knowing the properties of your product. So one example, a very interesting example would be like this one. So like if you have a product, so if you can improve on the properties of your product, if you can make the product stronger before you design your packaging, so that would at least lower the cost for your packaging, because now you will make use of simpler or lesser amount of packaging because now your product is stronger, or now your product is better or easier to transport. Like for example, for watermelons. So if it is circular, it would be difficult to transport, but changing the shape of the product. So if you can come up with square or cubical watermelons, for example, then that would be much easier. And so your transport cost, your design of your packaging would be lower also because you have improved the product. Okay, but then chances are, with regard to the environment, you cannot do anything anymore with the environment. So the same is true with the product. Chances are, if you will change your product, then your customers might not anymore patronize your product. And so we are limited when it comes to changing the environment and changing the product. And so our third option would be what? The packaging. Know your packaging. And so if you cannot change your environment, if you cannot further improve on your product, then the solution would be finally on the packaging. Do something about the packaging, do something about the transport packaging. So in the case of the transport packaging, so we will consider the capability, the integrity, or the performance po ng ating packaging system. So example would be ang performance po ng ating corrugated box, which would be the most common packaging transport packaging being used. Or in this particular picture, so we have some kind of a unitizing system para po ma-unitize po yung mga manok. So i-check po natin yung capability niya, yung performance characteristic ng ating packaging. So would it be able to deliver the function that we want for a transport packaging, at the same time yung economic aspect din po ng ating packaging. So if we will go back to our design equation, product plus package should be equal or should be greater than the environment. So yung question po natin is, how harsh is the environment related to the environment? How durable is the product related to the product? And how much and what kind of packaging is needed to assure that the product will arrive without damage? So these are the questions that we need to know and we need to answer, because before we can come up with our optimum packaging design. Okay? And so to increase, as I have mentioned earlier, there are two ways to increase the protection and decrease the damage level. Number one is we make our product stronger, which sometimes would be difficult for us, or we are limited in using this particular method. But the second would be, if you cannot make your product stronger, then you can make the package what? Better. Make the transport packaging better. So this would be a particular diagram that would explain the relationship of the product and the package and the distribution environment. So in the diagram, for example, in the first column, if we only have our product and subject it to a very severe environment without packaging, then the product will be damaged. So if we will now make use of a package, so we will add the strength of the product to the strength of the package, so now it would be able to withstand the severity of the environment, and we have the package and the product just enough to counter the effect or the hazard of the distribution environment, that we would say that this would be the optimum packaging and product design, okay, or optimum transport package design. While if we make use of a package but still it would not be able to protect the product, then we say that it is under package and damage will happen. Now, if we will make our packaging very, very strong, so that now the product and the package would be very strong, even stronger than the hazard being given by the distribution environment, that would be very good. But this time, the economics would be that now you have a more costly packaging. And so we say that we have what? Over packaging. Or we can do the fifth column, which is product improvement. So if you will improve on the strength of your product, you will reduce on your packaging, and that can translate also to possible lower costs. So this would be another representation of that principle. So we have the over packaging, we have the under packaging, we have the okay packaging, and then the optimized packaging, that if we can further improve on the product first before we do the packaging, then that would be the most ideal setup. Okay. So related and very important, aside from making an optimum design in terms of the function, now we know already that we have designed a packaging that can withstand the hazard, that can do the protection function of the packaging. What about the cost aspect or the economics aspect? So obviously, when we design our transport packaging, we want to minimize the cost. And here, the two most significant costs related to packaging would be the cost of the packaging material, or the cost of the packaging itself, and the cost of the damage. And that would be better explained by this diagram. So like for example, as we increase po yung cost ng ating packaging, mas lalong mahal po yung ating packaging. Obviously, mas magaling po, mas ma-protect po ang ating product. So, magiging lower po ang ating damage cost. So, konti po yung returns, konti po yung sira. So, as we increase the package cost, the damage cost would be lower. Tama po na lower po natin yung damage cost. Wala po tayong mga returns at mga breakage po or mga sira. Pero napataas naman po natin yung ating package cost. While the reverse would be, pag ni-lower naman po natin yung ating package cost, so that would be reduced cost, what will happen is mag-increase naman po yung ating damage cost. And both extremes would be not good. So hindi pwedeng sobrang ganda ng ating package cost na walang damage, mahal naman yung cost, or sobrang mura po ng ating packaging, sobrang dami naman ng cost. And so we have to do a balance. So yung the best po na packaging is when we combine the cost of the packaging and the damage cost, the lowest, then that would be the optimum packaging design. So natural po, meaning to say, na pag nag-design po tayo ng transport packaging, it's okay na magkaroon po tayo ng damage as long as pag binalance po natin yung cost ng ating packaging and then the resulting damage cost, lowest pa rin po yung ating total cost. So isa po yun sa mga considerations. And so if we will further include environment. So, our original equation is yung product plus package po natin dapat masabayan or ma-equal po niya yung total environment. And yung total environment, pwede pa po natin madagdag. Aside from the distribution environment, madagdag pa po natin ecological environment. Na pag nag-design po tayo ng ating packaging, dapat sustainable din po, dapat may concern din for environment. And even, yung significant po ngayon yung safety po. So pwede po nating masingit or pwede po nating ma-insert sa ating equation. So this would be like one example of how you can save lots of money or reduce your cost by optimizing your transport packaging. So this is for IKEA. And so ang kanila pong packaging would be for pizza. So they reduced the primary packaging. So this would be related to size reduction, or this would be related to material reduction. So na-reduce lang po nila ng 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch by 1/32 of an inch yung dimensions. And so when they transport, and then they designed also a new unitizing system, and by making use of a new unitizing system from in the picture from 44,000, now they can deliver 51,000 pizzas. And so with that, they were able to increase or they were able to decrease the number of truckloads and even ang biyahe po. And when we say fewer truckloads, that would also mean reduced transit cost and even for fuel and even for materials. So overall, they were able to save lots of money. And so before I finally end my presentation, so I would just recap that for us to be able to do effective transport packaging, we have to understand the distribution environment, we have to understand the product, we have to understand, of course, our packaging. And so for now, what we had would be just an overview or awareness of all these aspects. And so you can already start thinking based on our presentation and start asking about those areas for your distribution environment. So with those particular information, for example, so we can be able to optimize the design of our transport packaging. So we have like some tips for optimizing your transport packaging. So we can like minimize the package size, we can do the design of the structure, or we can make use of the most suited packaging material, which we can, I think, discuss more in detail in our next seminars in the future. And so I will finally end with some quotes related to our topic, which would be transport packaging, and also with the current situation that we are facing now. So this quote is actually related to the safety of packaging. And so from this quote, that this COVID-19 virus is actually not being spread by food or by packaging. So based on the studies done by the FDA and even by CDC, that the food product itself or the packaging is not the main, or would not be really a great mean for the spread of the virus. So it still would go back to our hygiene. It would still go back to our safety protocols, and even for good manufacturing practice. Okay. And so we say now that in this time, in this pandemic time, we are in this together, and we still get through this together. And so again, I thank everyone for participating in our webinar, and I would like to thank the OST Regional Office 6 for letting us from Central Philippine University, from the Packaging Engineering Department, share our knowledge to our SMEs. And we hope that you have at least learned something from our webinar today. And so let me just make mention that we are from the Packaging Engineering Department of Central Philippine University, and we offer the Packaging Engineering course here in the Philippines. And I also would like to make mention and acknowledge the founder and the advisor of the CPU Packaging Engineering Department, and that would be Dr. Lejo C. Branya. And so let me finally end with this Bible quote on God's creation. So God saw all that He had made, and it was very good. Taken from Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. So I say now that the best packaging engineer is still God. That's all, and thank you for watching. God bless everyone.
Thank you very much, Engineer Cangrejo. Now, ready na po tayo sa ating open forum at babasahin na natin ang mga tanong ng ating mga viewers. By the way, for those who are asking for a copy of the presentation for this session, we will be sending you a soft copy along with a certificate. Just make sure to fill out the evaluation form after this webinar. Okay, we have a question from Sir Michael Jan Makiling. In Ilocos region, maraming mga producers ng suka o vinegar, and some have stalls along the road and naiinitan or exposed to sunlight ang suka. The vinegar are packed in PET bottles. Question, may bad effect po ba ito sa product? I think this question is addressed to Sir Ron.
Sound check. Okay, so thank you for your question. So in your case, we have a packaged product, which is vinegar, and its packaging is PET bottles. Okay, so in here we have two interactions. Una, yung product and your packaging, meron silang interaction, and then yung environment. So in our case, nasa sidewalk lang siya. So yung heat or sunlight affects our packaging. So in terms of PET material to the vinegar, ang vinegar is actually diluted na acetic acid. So yung acetic acid actually is not really that compatible with PET, pero because it's in the vinegar form, it's actually satisfactory na as a packaging material. So in that regard, it's actually the one being used in even big companies. They use PET to package vinegar. So we have no problem in there. The second na interaction would be yung sa environment. So if nainitan siya sa araw, what would happen to our product? So PET is actually one of those materials which has a very high temperature tolerance. So vinegar at the same time, because of its very acidic nature as well, it's okay to be heated as long as it does not reach the boiling point. So in either both of them, if they are heated, if they are left outside at medyo mainit, okay lang. So far, satisfactory pa naman yung quality provided they do not reach the boiling points nila. Okay? So it would be safe, but again, it's another question there is how long have they been out in the sun? So that would also be a consideration, and it's good if matest siya. Pero if fast moving, most probably, nabibili siya agad, hindi naman siya magiging masyadong concern. Pero if you want, I could suggest, for example, if you want to protect from light, you could either transfer to, for protection lang without transparency, glass bottles. Of course, that would be very costly. But you could also use labels, okay? Yung mga full sticker labels to protect, to cover the transparent PET bottles. At least that could, to some degree, offer protection from light and therefore offer protection from the heat from the light source as well. So I hope that answers the question on the vinegar and the PET bottles.
Thank you very much, Sir Ron. So we have another question here from Abu Bak, a YouTube viewer, who will monitor that a certain MSME is using a food-grade plastic for their food product.
Safe plastic. Okay, so safe plastic. Okay, we have the 6 common plastic groups. If you've noticed, for example, the plastic bottle, if you look at the bottom, there's the numbers 1 to 7 in there, okay? And those 6 plus the 7 are actually, actually common to be used for food packaging. Yung sa kanila, 1, 2, 4, 5, at sometimes 7, they're basically safe, okay? Yung medyo may concern tayo would be si number 3, that is the PVC plastic, and si number 6, which is polystyrene plastic. Polystyrene is the common plastic used for clamshell packaging, okay? Provided you do not burn that plastic, for example, you won't have anything much to worry. Now, what regulates them? So FDA is the one regulating the food industry, okay? Although they're more concerned with the labeling, for example, and the safety and quality. So they're the ones who would actually request, kung big companies siya, they would request certificates of analysis, for example, or there could be testing that is being done. For SMEs, that's another question actually. Because MSMEs natin, they actually buy their packaging based on bigger suppliers. So usually what happens, they will just search for packaging materials, then the supplier would give, let's say, the catalog of their packaging materials, and then they choose from that. In that regard, sometimes our SMEs do not have the ability or capacity to actually test on the safety or quality or hygiene of their packaging materials. So it's good if the SME could actually coordinate that with their suppliers to check if the materials that they are using is good. Okay, but for the generally speaking, that major common plastics natin, they're actually okay na for food packaging din. So I think that that's the answer to that question.
Thank you very much, Sir Ron. Meron din a question from Paring Do. use burden, packaging that for the environment or something else. Lalo na ngayon na naging in demand ang plastic. Yes, nasa ni Sir ni Sir Rod question. And another question, parang yung viral video, the worker career, did they really do something wrong? I mean, paano madideliver kung hindi mabilis, kung hindi yahan. So sa akin, yung mali doon sa video is yung nakakababa.
I think Sir Burns will answer that one for transport packaging.
Okay, thank you for that observation, sir, and for that question also. I think with regard to the hazard in the distribution environment, that would be underloading and unloading. And so obviously, dahil tinatapon, merong possibility na masira yung product inside, especially if yung packaging is naka-design for a specific height lang. Kasi yung mga packaging natin, yung distribution or transport packaging natin, karamihan naka-design sa kung gaano lang kataas dapat pwedeng mahulog ang ating package kasama yung product na still ma-protect pa rin ng packaging yung ating product. So yung kung mga products po doon ay nakalagay sa mga packages na hindi naman dapat mahulog sa minimum or maximum required na height, obviously po masira po yung ating product. Okay. Salamat po.
Thank you very much, Sir Bernie. May question pa tayo dito from May Ann Brillantes. What is the best material in sealing the food items when we use a glass? So for glass packaging. For glass, sealing for glass.
Okay, so glass packaging, first, yung format ng glass natin is usually as bottles or jars. Okay? We don't have glass naman ng mga bags so far, no, at glass ng mga films. So yung sealing for glass bottles and jars are obviously on the cap, okay, yung cap nila, the lid or the cap. Now, in terms of protective on shelf life function, we will be more concerned na on the liner, on the back part, yung sa loob ng cap. If you look at the underside of the cap, meron dyan usually may transparent na film or may white na molded pulp or white na liner. That is the main concern natin on the shelf life of our food and beverage products packaged in glass packaging. So if we are going to buy glass bottles or glass jars, and if we want to lengthen the shelf life, we could look into that part, okay? Kasi yung glass by itself is a universal barrier. So it could actually protect from moisture, oxygen, and other gases by itself. The only way that the product could interact with the environment or the environment could interact with the product is through the cap. So papasok sa loob ng cap through the space there between the cap and the bottle and papasok sa bottle. So if the liner there is not good or it does not have a good fit, then there is merong interaction na mangyayari. But if the liner there is of good material and maganda yung fit niya, then that would protect and preserve the shelf life of our product. So in that regard, it's more the way to close it is actually caps, okay, and lids. And then yung liner, yan yung talaga yung mag-provide ng more preservation and protective function. In addition to that, if you can actually put shrink necks or shrink band around your cap, okay? So yung heat shrink na mga bands, yung parang we tear that and we throw it away kapag bumibili tayo. You can use that for added safety and it's a tamper evident na feature para malaman ng mga consumers natin na hindi na pala nabuksan yung bottle beforehand. So you can also add those shrink band around or shrink neck band around the cap and the lid niya. Okay. So I think that's the answer po.
Thank you very much, Sir Rod. So we have another question here from Ms. Filame Monteclaro. Any idea po for the supplier of pallet?
Okay, for pallets, during exhibits, we were actually able to see some suppliers offering pallets. Unfortunately, I was not able to get some of their cards. It's not here. So I think we could refer you to the regulating agencies or the agencies like DOST, ITDI. I think they could help you out with a list of suppliers, for example, for pallets.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Ron. Mamayang hapon po, we have expert from the ITDI. Pwede natin i-ask ulit yung questions para makapag-provide sila ng mga list or ng suggested suppliers for the pallet. We have another question from Ms. May Ann Reyes. What hazard does ink colors cause on the food, like label design? Ink colors.
Okay, so printing inks, if your supplier is good, actually, it's usually compatible with food. But when printing inks, the main hazard that could go there is obviously the contamination of the migration, for example, of ink into the packaging. Now, the main role of packaging here is to provide a material which prevents that migration. So mula sa outside going into the packaging, okay? And it depends if it's plastic, okay? It really depends on the type of plastic being used, because some different plastics have different properties when it comes to permeability and to compatibility with printing inks. Another thing that you have to consider is that oily products have a reverse naman na interaction, meaning that sometimes the oil from the product would go out through the packaging and attack the ink, okay? Or not just oil, maybe some other ingredients in the food, they could go through the packaging material and then attack the ink. If that happens, usually what happens is that the ink would smear, the ink would come off, okay, if the bonding is not good, because of the reactions with the migrated na mga chemical compounds or oil doon. So it's a two-way interaction. The ink could go into the packaging if the packaging material is not good enough, or the ingredients from the product could go outside through the packaging and attack the ink. So in both cases, the quality of the type and quality of packaging material will be the main consideration to protect your product from the ink and vice versa.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Ron. Mostly sa atin po dito, yung mga next na mga questions, nag-ask sila ng mga suppliers for packaging materials. So, for suppliers concerned, pwede po tayo mag-refer or i-refer na lang namin kayo sa nearest na DOST office or sa ITDI for the list of suppliers ng different kinds of packaging materials. Thank you. Meron tayo ditong question from Sir Gerard Ray Tabaldo of GRT Bead Arts and Craft. What would be the best plastic may I use for packaging of face masks, PE or PP?
Okay, so given the choice PE or PP, actually they belong to the same family of plastics called the polyolefins. And PE and PP are very much alike when it comes to most of their properties. PP is slightly higher lang na in terms of mechanical and barrier niya compared to PE. In terms of face mask, either way would be okay, actually, okay? I think the most commonly used, I'm not sure, but for me, when I bought face mask, I see that it's PE that they are using. That's okay. PP or PE both have could have the same capability to protect the face mask. The question here now would be on the cost implication naman, okay? So you have to consider first thickness and then the type of material. So PP generally, I'm not sure in other suppliers, but the last time I checked, PP has a bit more pricey cost compared to PE. I'm not sure right now if that has changed. So I think the concern here on face mask, since we're all familiar that face mask, everyone is looking for face mask and they want to buy the cheapest face mask because some face masks are so expensive. The consideration here would be the cost. But in terms of protection, either PE or PP could be used to give the needed requirements for protection of our face masks. And I think, sir, okay. I think that answers.
Okay, we have here another question, but it's, I think, more on the product shelf life. How long the shelf life of frozen foods like chicken nuggets, as we are not using any additives aside from the basic seasoning? Customers sometimes give feedback that the product turned sour, although it is only newly produced, and they did not yet immediately cook with it within the day. Any packaging being used is RE500 plastics. So, anong natural preservatives po to prolong the shelf life?
Thank you for that question. With regard to the shelf life, I don't know about the preservatives that you can use to extend the shelf life, but in relation to packaging, I think you need really to do actual testing of your product plus your package. So you do shelf life testing, both of your do shelf life testing of your product inside your package so that you can really have an accurate and correct shelf life for your product. So kailangan po talagang ipa-test. And with regard to the type of material na pwedeng gamitin, I think Sir Ron can add something also.
Okay, I think the material used, it has some kind of a trade name or brand name, which is usually supplier dependent. So some suppliers, they actually make names for their products. In the generic term, though, your product is frozen, and there are some materials which are not good when frozen. So I'm not exactly sure what the brand name is, what its generic name or what would be its base material. But if it's polypropylene or polyvinyl, PVC, PVDC, or PP, if there's no additives on the plastic, it's not good in freezer or refrigerated temperatures. So I think you could consider that. It might be that the material might degrade. That's why the shelf life is shorter. You could just use traditional polyethylene terephthalate, that's PET, or PA, nylon, polyamide is also used. Those are the main materials which are usually recommended for frozen foods.
Okay, thank you, Sir Bernie and Sir Ron. To add lang po, ako po isang food tech. So, with regards to sa shelf life ng frozen chicken nuggets, before din natin i-consider yung packaging material, we also have to consider the GMP or the good manufacturing practices, and from the receiving or from the selection of the raw mat up to the end of process, hanggang po i-package natin yung product. So, kahit anong ganda, linis ng packaging material natin, during the process, for example, from the raw mat pa lang itself, hindi na okay, so hindi natin i-expect yung magandang quality ng product. So, with regards to that, we have to check natin kung ano ba ang cause ng spoilage. Kung souring, pwede siyang microbial, biological yung yung contaminant. Posibleng nasa chicken na mismo, sa raw chicken, or pwedeng during the process, baka may contamination na involved. So, babalik po tayo sa GMP, sa good manufacturing practices na ating ginagawa. Ayun, so we also have to check our suppliers for the raw material. And also, tama si Sir Bernie and si Sir Rod, and dapat meron din tayong testing ng ating finished product. Pwedeng i-test natin siya for the presence of E. coli, total coliforms, lahat na aerobic plate count ng product. So we also pwede tayong mag-ask ng question ng mga microbial test sa nearest DOST na nasa ating region or province. Thank you. We have a question from Ms. Riciel Ann. For fermented products such as vinegar or kombucha, what is the recommended packaging? Because I've noticed that some are packaged using glass bottles and some are plastics.
Okay, so in those kinds of products, we have now a case-to-case basis or a product-specific system wherein you have to first understand what is the deteriorative reaction or method of spoilage of your product. So if, for example, vinegar, what would be the method of spoilage of vinegar? And that's if, I'm not really a food tech, so I'm not sure. For example, if you have a product which is sensitive to light, then make sure you prefer the one with an opaque packaging. If you have a product sensitive to, let's say, oxygen, you could go for a more barrier in glass. Now, in regards to your question, I could just give a generic answer because it would be, again, product specific regarding what kind of fermented product that is. But if you are going to compare plastic and glass, glass would have the higher capability to actually protect your product in terms of barrier protection. So when it comes to oxygen, moisture, or other gases, glass would actually be a better material versus plastic. However, you also have to take note, again, when you say packaging, you have to consider it in a holistic approach, okay? So aside from the fact is that glass is heavy and it might cost more when it comes to logistics. So just consider that as well. But when it comes to protection function, glass would be better than plastic.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Ron. So another question from Ms. Pelome Monteclaro. Aside from COPP packaging for chips and sticks, what is the best form of packaging that can you recommend for chips, for example?
So thank you for that. This is actually now the part of packaging wherein we deal with the creative or aesthetic na aspect, okay? Usually when it comes to protective and technical considerations, knowing MSMEs, you could stick with your current materials, okay? Because the more, let's say, more custom packaging materials are more costly and has volume requirements. But if you're going to look for a change of packaging by, let's say, maintaining the same material, you could, it's time to channel our inner creativity. You could actually think of different formats of packaging. So chips are usually packaged in pouches. We could now, we could check what the other alternatives are. So I could not say exactly the best form of packaging because it still depends on your goal in your business and in your distribution environment. But you could go, for example, stand-up resealable pouches. You could go for a clamshell type of packaging where you put your chips so that it could be more protective. Or you could go for a carton, which is more rigid than plastic pouches, which could further protect the chips. We're also familiar with the cylinder or canisters, like the Pringles, for example. That could be an alternative. So this is an open-ended. You could actually explore a lot of formats, a lot of ideas. And if you search the internet, there are so many creative ideas in there about how to package different types of products. So you could check on your chips, and maybe you could find a unique packaging, which at the same time could protect your product.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Ron. And we have another question from Sir Paul Agustin. With regards to one of the function of packaging, that is to provide communication with consumers, now how can consumers verify that the info being put there are true?
With regard to the communication function, with regard to the correct information and correct labeling for our packaging. So meron po tayong batas and meron po tayong mandatory labeling requirements po para sa mga produkto po natin. So may mga dapat na nakalagay talaga doon sa packaging ng ating product or sa label ng ating product. So yung question po na paano malalaman kung tama o hindi, I think we have government regulatory bodies that would check kung tama ba, sinusunod ba yung labeling requirements ng ating mga packaging ng ating mga products. So I think one way of knowing that would be if you are familiar kung ano yung mga dapat na andoon para you are sure na legit o talagang tama yung mga information na nakalagay doon. But then basically, we have government regulating agencies that would check sa kung tama ba yung mga information na nakalagay po sa ating packaging. Salamat po.
Thank you so much, Sir Bernie. We have another question here from Miss Mary Elizabeth Pareño. Good day, Sir Ron and Sir Bernie. For locally produced fruit wines, due to unavailability of suppliers of glass bottles, what is the better plastic bottle alternative that you could recommend?
Okay, good morning, Mary. So when it comes to unavailability of glass, so we have no choice. Since it's wine, you could go for the plastic bottles or the retort pouches. So I'm not sure right now how the research on retort pouch for wine is ongoing, but I think the better answer would be on the plastic bottles. Now, when it comes to plastic bottles, our main plastic bottles are just PET, HDPE, and PVC. And PP is extrusion blow molded. So when it comes to plastic bottles, PET would still be between the different readily available plastic types. PET bottles would still be your best fit, okay? Unless there are more engineered plastics out there which are better than PET, then you could go for that. But I think that will be more costly. But for the available and common na plastics natin, PET would still be the one with a better barrier. So you just check na lang if the closures, the caps, and how the interaction with the environment would go with the product and PET bottles.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Ron. We would like to acknowledge Ms. Daisy Franca from the UST ITBI. Benzophenone migration from printed paperboard and phthalates from printed plastics. This is to answer the question on the link for printing used for packaging from Ms. Daisy. Thank you, Ma'am Daisy. I think this is a follow-up question from Ms. Sir Gerard. PP or PE are still applicable for face mask if you send it abroad, considering the weather or the situation.
Okay. So in that case, if it's going to be sent abroad, we now have to consider the other levels of packaging. So the PE and PP are just the ones which you could use for your primary pack. But if you're going to go for transport packaging, it's the better question there is what would be your shipping container or shipping case. So that's the question now. So the PE and PP is still okay as a primary packaging, but the bigger question, since it's going to be transported, is what packaging to use for transport. So that's where you're going to try to research and find suppliers for corrugated boxes. Check the locations where you are going to deliver it. If it's extremely rugged, so Sir Bernie has already discussed the severity, for example. You could check what kind of boxes can you use. Can you have the lower quality, we have the higher quality, we have double walled boxes, we have wooden crates and boxes if you want to. So I think it's now more of a question of the shipping container that should be used.
Thank you so much, Sir Ron. My last question. Okay. From Sohana. For ground coffee packaging po, na walang one-way gas sa pouch, is it acceptable na mag-mulch packaging? No bacterial issues po ba sa testing?
Okay, so the product is coffee, and we know that coffee actually exhales, kumbaga, I think carbon dioxide ba yung gas, I think, carbon dioxide, which inflates the packaging. If walang one-way valve yung packaging, the packaging will obviously bulge. Now, in terms of microbial, based on what I have learned, parang wala naman siyang so far, hindi ganon kaano yung effect sa microbes. Unless you have anaerobic bacteria there but could thrive in carbon dioxide rich environments inside the packaging, yun lang naman siguro. Pero other than that, there won't be much concern on microbial effect when it comes to the bulging of the packaging. Yung mas concern natin is yung pack size, if kaya niya i-contain yung pressure inside the packaging. So I'm not sure if food technologists could give more answer when it comes to micros, pero based on what I've researched, parang wala naman siya. So far, not that big effect on bulging and the carbon dioxide inside the packaging po.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ron. Okay, may other question dito from Miss Nina Heron. What is the best packaging material for kakanin or sticky desserts, and best packaging material for indigenous product? Food.
Okay. So again, we have here specific na naman na product. So you check kung ano again yung deteriorative reaction of your kakanin. So what makes it spoil? And that's where you base your packaging material. So usually when it comes to questions like best packaging, we could not give a black and white answer because it's usually a case-to-case basis depending on your type of product. That's why as manufacturers, as SMEs, we have to first understand what is our product. So if the kakanin, your particular kakanin is sensitive to, let's say, moisture, okay, then you could choose a packaging which protects from moisture. So that could be one of the regular plastics natin, okay na yon, or it could be glass, for example. But I don't think we put kakanin in glass. So if it's sensitive naman to oxygen, or let's say oxygen na lang, regular plastics doesn't work really that well. So you have to consider, let's say, metallized foil, metallized film, or glass packaging. But again, it depends on the product itself. And I would like also to repeat what Ma'am Joanne had said, that it's also about how you manufacture the product. Okay? We have researches on indigenous products before, and they really want to extend the shelf life of the certain product, but they were unable to because the product by itself really has a very, very short shelf life. So even though they package it in metal, which is one of the ultimate barrier, it spoils equally. So sometimes it depends on the product itself, how it deteriorates. So I think to answer your question, ma'am, you just check first, how does your product deteriorate, and from there move on to the kind of packaging. Of course, glass, metal are usually the top tier na packaging materials when it comes to protection, but they are also more costly.
Okay. Thank you, Sir Ron. I think that's the last question for this morning session. Thank you very much, Sir Ron Jonaldo and Engineer Bernie Cangrejo. We apologize if not all your questions can be accommodated due to time constraints. We will make sure po na lahat ng mga questions ninyo, bigyan namin ng sagot, and we will send it through your email. Later this afternoon, we will have another topic on smart packaging technology. Pa-flash din namin sa screen yung link on your evaluation form, and hope that all participants can take time to fill this out before leaving this webinar. And also, please join later, 1:15 in the afternoon, yung another session natin for smart packaging technology. And for that, thank you everyone, and see you this afternoon at 1:15 p.m. Thank you.